Nowadays, you only ever hear people comparing Overwatch 2 to Marvel Rivals, so I thought, why not compare two games that, while fits in this type of debate, shouldn't really be compared because they've never really been put into the same room together. And really, there's no other way to put it. Today, I'm comparing Paladins with Marvel Rivals. So today, I'm actually only really comparing characters that can be compared between Paladins and Marvel Rivals, since there's a huge cast in Paladins that Marvel Rivals can't really compare to as of yet. So I'm trying to keep things simple. And right now we have Azan, who at first glance doesn't really have any similarities. You know, he has a shield that doesn't really appear too similar to other shields in other games. However, he can throw his hammer, and then his ultimate is he jumps up to the sky and then slams back down, knocking people back and possibly stunning them, I think. And then I wanted to say that Azan was similar to Thor in a way, but not necessarily. In like the most generous sense, they're kind of similar. However, I think their ults are similar.
Behold the god of thunder!
Up next, I wanted to compare Betty La Bamba, who shoots bombs. That's kind of her whole shtick. However, Paladins has a lot more abilities than Marvel Rivals, so she also has an ability where she can jump around a lot, or, you know, jump really high in a very short amount of time, depending on how you want to use it. And then her ultimate is a bomb, believe it or not, which I believe is used better in crowded areas, as most explosives are. And you'll find that this comparison is between this character and another explosive character. Now we have Squirrel Girl, who I think is similar to Betty La Bamba, because they both have bouncing explosives. But Betty La Bamba and Squirrel Girl both have a bouncing ability, which I think is pretty neat. But Squirrel Girl also has a reload ability, which isn't quite on par. Betty La Bamba works well in crowded spaces, and Squirrel Girls also works in crowded spaces. Because now you got this going. Up next we have Buck, who has a shotgun, and he also has a net that when he hits someone with it, they slow, and then you can also deal extra damage to them with your shotgun, which is pretty neat, but I don't think it's really similar to anyone who uses a net. But then you got a leaping ability that deals AoE damage to whoever's around you. And then, if you're ever low on health, you can always just recover it with his recover ability. That's literally what it's called. Look it up. And then his ultimate lets him shoot faster and stronger, which gives him, you know, faster and stronger shotgun. And I couldn't really find any real similarities except for one character, Punisher. But Buck in Paladins also holds a shotgun. However, in terms of similarities, the only similarities between Buck and Punisher are the shotgun and the fact that they have a movement ability, which is not this ability. I also wanted to add that both their L2 abilities are kind of similar in that they affect the enemy in some way. Up next we have Corvus, who can give his mark to an ally, which either lets him heal them for a bonus amount of HP, or he can heal someone else and give the marked ally a portion of what they heal. And he's also got, you know, a hit scan, like little SMG. He has a teleporting ability. None of those are really similar to any other supports in the game, I would say. And then his ultimate here, it's an AoE type of move. It deals damage, and it seems to heal him. I don't know if it heals allies, but the only similarity I found was with Luna Snow. And then I think she's also similar to Ray, or Corvus, who can give his mark to other people. And it can either boost one person's healing or share him healing with another person. Here we have Dredge, who I think can be compared to a lot of other characters in Marvel Rivals, because he's got explosive lob shots like Squirrel Girl, and then he has these mine things that are set off like Penny and do catastrophic damage. However, they kind of work a little differently, but, you know. And he also has a harpoon, or I guess like a trident like Namor has. And then he also has a teleport thing, kind of like how Loki's works, because it's also placing down another part of you just so you could teleport back to that part. In a way they're the same, and in a way they're different. And then his ultimate is kind of like Namor's as well, because there's a decent time to get away, but it also does catastrophic damage. Next up we have Inara, who is another tank who is Mother Nature, pretty much just Mother Nature. She can boost her guard, and then she also has this little thing that slows people, stops them from using their movement abilities, and also deals damage. And then she has a wall that can block people off or lock people in. But unlike another certain character, this isn't like a wall that reacts to her attacks, but their ults both stun their enemies, so there's that. Imagine who I'm gonna say he's similar to, much like Inara, although the difference here, well, to be fair, that specific wall doesn't attack with Groot, so I guess that one's similar to Inara. However, this one, not so much. Next up, we have Kasumi, who doesn't totally have to aim at the person in order to hit them. However, the window for this sort of thing is small, so it's not totally broken. However, you can see here that she gives these stacks that go up to 5. This gives her primary fire a damage buff, while also giving her L2 a damage buff, which is kind of just like another part of her move set, which is another thing to kind of like mix in with her attacks. She has a trap type move that can also give characters fear if you use a certain talent, which is kind of like immobilizing in a way. She has an ability where she gives herself damage reduction as she moves her soul wherever she wants to and teleports back to her soul. And then she has her ultimate, which is an AoE move that lets her deal damage to a group of people, gives them stacks and huge damage buff. Now we have Scarlet Witch, who I think is similar to Kasumi from Paladins, because they both don't really have to aim for their shots. However, Scarlet Witch is even worse than Kasumi, so... And then they both have an L2 ability that really works well when you combo it with their R2. They both have an ability that lets them move away from their bodies, I guess in a sense. They turn invisible, invulnerable, whatever you want to call it. And then they both have an ability where they have like an AoE type of trap move. Kasumi's trap move is kind of only a thing when you select a certain talent. However, it is still there, I believe. So, I mean, I'm gonna go off on a technicality. Next up, we have Koga, who has dual SMGs, and then he also has a dash ability that, if you equip the right cards, can also reload his SMGs if you wanted to. And then, the more you shoot at people, the more damage you do, the more your energy bar refills, which lets you do more damage, and also lets you use his agility ability, which lets him run faster and jump higher. And he can also climb walls. However, the walls here are weird, but you can climb them up way higher than you want. Next he has Dragon Stance, which shoots out these projectile like claw things. And then at the end you can like do a dash that does also the same amount of damage, just to kind of like finish things off if you want. And then his ult is an AoE move that does quite a significant amount of damage. Next I got Star-Lord, who I think is similar to Koga, in that, you know, they're both dual SMG users. They both have a dash type move. They both have something that can let them speed up in one way or in another. And then, well, I wouldn't say that one's really similar to anything, but that ability is there. Up next is Xin, who is a sword type user who actually doesn't really use a sword, but rather the fire that he shoots out of his sword. And he also has a counter ability, and he also has a dash ability, and then he has a billow ability, which makes him invulnerable, and I think can heal him. And then his ultimate, basically just an insta-kill. However, I chose the right talent that makes him do this, so not all the time will he do this, but it is still pretty OP. Next we have Magic, who I think is actually the closest thing to Xin, because they're both sword users. They can both shoot stuff out of their swords for some reason. And then they both have dash abilities. And then you'll see, actually, because if we do the thing, you'll see that this is very similar to one of Xin's abilities. Where if we do this, that ability. Next we have Black Panther, who I think is similar to both Xin and Koga in a generous sense, just because they're both insanely versatile flankers that can do some pretty nasty damage. And then Koga and Black Panther can both go on walls, which I think is pretty neat. Up next we have Ruckus, who I actually think is a pretty decent tank who shoots out these machine guns, and then he also has an explosive ability, and then he has a shield. You know, as most tanks do, they have a shield, because that's kind of how it works. And then he also has an ability that either lets him jump up or jump forward. Either way, it's a great movement ability. And then he also has his ult, which I think is the best. A huge amount of guns and damage. And you're probably wondering who I'm comparing this to. I'm comparing it to the Punisher. They both have a main fire that's like pretty fast like this. They both have an ability that's, I wouldn't say explosive, but you know, Punishers and Ruckuses are both AoE, and then their ultimates are also very similar. Like, really similar. Next up we have Lex, who isn't really similar to anyone, but here's his ult, which you'll find pretty similar to someone else. But before we get to that, here's another character I want to talk about, which is Makoa, who is a tank, and he has a hook ability, and who brings people to him. And then he has a shield ability that covers his whole body, but then he can also use this little shell bounce. Next we have Bucky, or the Winter Soldier, who I think is kind of similar. Like, this is the second comparison I made to a tank and DPS, who I think is similar to Makoa, because they both have a hook move, and then they both have an ability that also lets you, like, combo your hook move with another dash type move.
Come back here.
Kind of like that. They both have kind of that similar thing. The difference is Makoa's a tank, so he has a shield type move, and then Winter Soldier has that. I did forget to show off the thing with Winter Soldier that I think is similar to another DPS called Lex, who, like Winter Soldier, has a little pop-up that shows that means whenever you use your ult, it's gonna insta-kill them. Next up we have Rom, who is just Satan with a Gatling gun. And then whenever you deal damage to opponents, these soul things drop, which give them extra health, which kind of like the thing's damage reduction, except for, you know, their damage reduction in different ways, but still technically. And then we got his run, which, now that I've already said the thing, you're probably thinking I'm comparing this to the thing, which you would be right, especially since these two abilities are so very similar. Now, despite being, like, a little bit fundamentally different, I still feel like they're the same. And then we got this. Much like Rom, as kind of like Rom as well, is his ultimate. Next up we have Ray, who can chain link to an ally, so only one, and it gives him passive healing, and then you can press L2 and it does a chain bounce, which bounces between all allies nearby. And then this a little ability, Envelop, which just speeds them up, and I think a little bit of damage reduction, but I think that's about it. And then we got her ultimate, which can save a tank. Isn't that great? Next we have Adam Warlock, who I also think is similar to Ray in that they have abilities that chain themselves to their friends, and then they also have a chain bounce while also having
flawless,
a decent attack, I guess. And then their ultimates also can save people. Well, one is before they die, the other one is after they die. Next we have Shaolin, which I'll let my future self explain why I'm comparing these two, but I'm comparing this guy to Hawkeye, as you can kind of tell, which he has, you know, his bow, but he doesn't have headshot value, which is kind of good for this game. But he also has a crippling arrow, which stops them from using their movement, and also they're just slowed in general, which Hawkeye only does the slowness part, but I'm fine with that. You're probably going to guess what that's comparing. He has a leap, and then his ultimate, which is fundamentally different from Hawkeye's, but also not really, because they both help each other in offensive combat in a way. So really, they're kind of just one and the same. Hawkeye,
I think I was chosen to do some good in the world.
who I think is similar to Shaolin, who is very similar in the fact that they're both bow users with an ability that, you know, also uses the bow that slows people. They both have a leaping ability. But the only difference is their ults and the fact that while Hawkeye has a sword, Xin can go invisible. So, I mean, take that as you will. Next we have Skye, who even though she's a little different and doesn't seem to be comparable to any other characters, you'll see that, like, just gameplay-wise, she's a character who has a primary and secondary fire, in a sense, and then they can both go invisible, and then they both have an ult that, in different ways, can still deal damage to a good group of people. Next we have Psylocke, who I actually think is similar to Skye from Paladins, despite them having different fire rates and, you know, different guns in general. They do have that primary fire mixed in with secondary fire pretty well. And while they don't really have a dash ability in Paladins that fits Skye, but they both can go invisible. And I guess like in another generous sense, their ults also affect a wide area. Now it's pretty difficult to see why I'm comparing these two, but I'm comparing Torvald with another tank, and Torvald can shield his allies, but he also has a shield himself, which with this ability you see in the second here replenishes it, which you just don't see because, you know, he's already full shield. And then his ultimate pushes people away, which if you really want to look at it is kind of similar to this other character. Next we have Magneto, who I think is similar to Torvald, who can shield other people. While his is an alt, Magneto does also have the ability to push other people away. Although Torvald doesn't have a shield normally, it's just the ones that he puts around himself and others, which Magneto also has. The differences are the ultimates as well. Next up we have Victor, which as much as I want to like pull up the Punisher clip again, I've already compared him already. You know, it would just be the same clip of me talking about his comparison with Ruckus, so let's just like skip past it. They both have ARs, they both have like an AoE type move, they both have abilities to get around. Their ultimates can also deal catastrophic damage to groups of people. Like, can we just like skip that part where I show you guys the clip? Like, you guys believe me, right? And lastly, we have Ying, who is a hit scan burst fire type character that deals bonus damage on the last shot if you hit all of them. She has a clone that can blow up on her opponent's faces, but if you select a specific talent, it can change into a healing move instead. She can teleport between her clones or a clone she set in the past during a time limit, and then she can't actually heal people on her own unless she selects a specific talent. She either has to rely on her clones or her ultimate, which can heal everyone no matter where they are, and then she can also teleport to them whenever she wants. So yeah. Next we have Loki, who I think is similar to Ying, because they both have clones that heal. Well, they can heal, or they can attack, and you can teleport between them. Now we have Luna, who, like Ying, also has a burst hit scan type move.
You seeing stars?
Which is pretty neat. I never really thought of it though.
There they